if you can draw a box in perspective, you can pretty much draw anything you want. And it's not just a box either. If you can draw simple shapes in perspective, you can pretty much just draw anything. And if you want to draw large scenes with multiple characters, you have to learn how to draw in perspective. Boxes help me think in three-dimensional space, and so that's what I do when I am drawing thumbnails and I am creating a new drawing. I would start with the thumbnail sketches, and I probably should have did more, but it's all right. I'm just glad that I finished something and I got this illustration done. The hardest part about drawing the thumbnails and trying to get the perspective right and stuff like that is trying to make things feel dynamic and really interesting. I really wanted to create a dramatic scene for this illustration, and I probably should have drew more thumbnail sketches, but I felt like I had a good foundation for drawing. But yeah, while I'm sketching these thumbnails, you can see that I draw a grid out, and that's because I want to make sure I'm training myself to think in perspective. Every time I draw, I want to be thinking in perspective and thinking about how the form works in whatever perspective I draw. For this thumbnail sketch, I drew it in 3-point perspective, and that helped it feel a little bit more dynamic, made the scene feel a little bit more dramatic as well. And I also knew that I wanted this drawing, the scenes, to be raining, and so having the viewer look up at the characters and the focal point and into the rain felt like that was the right move. Now that I finished this drawing, I definitely, like I said, I could have drew more thumbnails, and I would have liked to experiment with more of a closer camera view, and that would have made it feel a little bit more personal, and we would have got to see the characters' expressions a lot more. And that's just my fault for not doing more thumbnail sketches. But overall, I like how this piece came out. I just wish I would have experimented with my thumbnails a little bit more. It's really fun when you start learning how to implement perspective into your drawings, because you can really get interesting compositions, and the more you draw perspective, the more comfortable you get with also drawing characters in perspective. It's probably one of the hardest parts about this piece was actually drawing the characters in perspective and making sure that they felt proportional compared to the scene that they're in. Especially the guy sitting on the bench. Wanted to make sure that he actually looks like he's sitting on the bench. So overall, everything is looking good. After the thumbnail stage, I just go in and start sketching out the decorations and the props of the scene. That's what really helps make the scene come alive as well. The pottery, the signs, the lamppost, and everything I draw, I drew from reference so that I don't have to make anything up. But even for the characters, if you can draw a box that's folding in perspective and make it look anatomically correct, then you're at a good spot. I really enjoyed drawing the characters. That was definitely my favorite part of this whole thing. Just making like a scene out of this, like making a story out of this, and having the characters interact in some way is something I can do better in my illustrations and drawings. And what better way to do that than drawing them in some type of scene in perspective. Like I said, I should have did more thumbnails because I wanted this to feel a little bit more personal. And at this point, I'm just in too deep. I gotta finish this drawing because I gotta I just gotta finish something. And since I started drawing it, since I'm refining everything, I'm just like, I gotta finish it now. So don't quit now, just keep drawing. And yeah, so don't give up. Just like finish the drawing. If you don't like how it's turning out, just finish it. If you don't like how you drew that hand, just finish it. Don't trip about it. Just do better in the next drawing. That's one thing I gotta get better at, is actually finishing my drawings and actually following through with the whole process. Doesn't matter how good or bad I think it is during the process or after the process. I'm just glad I actually went and finished it. So in this scene, I have this character, this knight character. in the rain, sitting outside in the rain. I mean, outside this inn, and this innkeeper, this lady, uh, invites him into the inn inside where he can get out the rain and relax. So that's pretty much the story for this illustration. It's nothing crazy, but I want to start drawing more scenes where characters are interacting and actually doing things together. So I designed these characters on the fly pretty much, except for the night guy. I kind of had an idea of what I wanted him to wear and stuff like that, but for the woman, it was just kind of find reference and and draw it. So yeah, after I get done with all the character reference, I draw their clothing that I use from reference. And because I did the fundamentals, I established my perspective and I understood how everything worked, and I understood where the forms are and how they interact with the environment, especially with the characters. I already know that this is going to be a strong piece just based off my perspective drawing. So I don't need to worry about anything looking wonky because I've already handled that in that thumbnail stage and that refinement stage. The most challenging part of this illustration was actually coloring it and rendering it. Because I'm learning how to paint this year, I want to implement painting techniques and line art techniques together. And so in the background, I painted in the buildings, these medieval looking European buildings, and in the foreground where my focal point is, that's where I do my line art. And so because the line art is so sharp anyway, I wanted that to be the focal point, and it already took me long enough to draw the line art. So I'm like, I'm not trying to do any more line art. I want to learn how to paint and paint in the buildings in the background. So I do that and I just simplify it, make sure my perspective is on point. I'm using the perspective grid in Clip Studio to help me color in those buildings and paint in those flat shapes for the buildings. I don't put in a lot of detail in the background just for that specific reason, that like I don't need them to be super complicated because they're not my focal point. My focal point is the two characters interacting and the inn that they are about to enter into. So it's a cool little story moment that I'm glad I drew, glad I finished, and I'm glad I was able to implement line art drawing and painting at the same time. It's nothing complicated. The painting is super simple, but I basically just draw flat shapes for the castle in the background and use values to accentuate the form. So I draw all the windows and the towers and stuff, but basically just using simple values. That's what I'm learning. Painting is all about simple shapes and values, and yeah, I definitely had to use reference for castle and the background painting and all that. But so yeah, because I separated the two styles of rendering, I thought it would be a good idea to just cell shade the foreground and the characters and all the line art, and pretty much leave the painting alone and just separate those two styles of rendering. Just made it a little bit easier for me to color and render this. And so yeah, just when you're creating an illustration like this, it's important to make sure you have those fundamental skills ingrained into you so that everything looks accurate and in perspective. Sometimes I can I can draw some things that might not look super accurate, but overall this was a good learning experience and I'm glad I finished this drawing. So I didn't show it in the time lapse here, but at the end of this drawing, after I got finished with it, I was happy how it looked, but I wanted to add some type of texture to the overall feel of the drawing and make it feel like some type of like a fantasy kind of I'm not sure how to say it, but I just added like an interesting texture that made it feel a little bit more grainy, a little bit more maybe not realistic, but the texture just added a little bit more to the drawing, made it feel a little bit more alive. And I'm glad I did that because it reminded me of like a video game cutscene or something like that. So overall, this painting was a success. This drawing slash painting slash illustration. It was fun to do. I wish I could have got a little bit more closer to the characters and showed their emotions a little bit more. But hey, I finished something and I didn't give up on it. And it took me a long time to create it, but it is what it is. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you try to push through whatever drawing you are stuck on and finish it. And I hope this encourages you. I hope that you try challenging yourself by drawing in perspective more often with characters, with buildings, with props, and create something cool. So let me know what the hardest part about drawing in perspective is for you, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.